All right, students, here we go. Wanted to show you how the last week I lasered a skull, right? And I routered a skull. And then I did the epoxy last week. See a little bit of the gold flake in there? Not much. And I've got it sanded. Let me wet it so you can see what it'll look like when it's finished. Doesn't that bring out the color of the epoxy and the wood? So it'll look real shiny like that when I add the finish. This is just water. So whenever you want to see what a color or species of wood's going to look like with finish on it, you can just use water and it'll do the same thing. It'll show you the colors, okay? How vivid they are and the grain structure and all of that. So a little tidbit for you. I can see a little bit of gold in there, but it came out pretty nice. What do you think? I like it. All right, so this week we're focusing on the lap desk. This one is partially done. The finish isn't on the top yet, but you can see the hardware. If I loosen it, it can flip over. This would be your writing side, your book reader side, the part that holds the computer, right? That's what this little stick down here is for, okay? Then the other side is kind of for show, for your graphics. Okay, so I'm going to show you the steps this week of how to take that from panels, which you know how to make, to the finished product. All right, so you can see I've been working ahead of you. I've gotten the wood that was stacked over here, got a long board, cut it up right. From the long board, we laid out the parts. We figured the board feet of the board, took it over to the radio arm saw, cut it into rough lengths, right? This is 1 inch longer than it should be and about 1 inch wider. After that, we ripped anything wider than 4, because if it's wider than 4, it warps, right? So we ripped our pieces, and then, as you know, we flipped the end grain on every other one. We labeled it IO, IO, IO. Then we join over here. I is in, O is out. I've shown you that process, okay? We dry clamp. If it looks good, we add our glue, and the next day after it's glued, we take it to the planer, plane the thickness, surface sander to make it smooth. Now what are we ready for? Ready to cut it to size, right? That's what it says on our plan of procedure. 4-step process. Do you remember what step is first? Let me grab my plan here. 4-step process we've talked about. The first step, of course, is joining. Okay, coming over here to my joiner, and I'm looking at it. Really no defects. If there's a defect on this side, I joint this side so I could rip that on the table saw. Step 2. Step 1, joint the straightest edge. There's step 1. I'm gonna mark it. All right, I'm gonna need a pencil too. Doggone it. Don't know what I did with it. Pencils, there they are. That'll work. All right, step number 2. The plan says this thing has to be 11 1/4 wide. So 11 1/4, right? See it? And we lock it down. Jointed edge against the fence. Step number 2. Groove is showing. Don't have to use push sticks, right? Watching the fence. Keep it tight to the fence. Push it till it drops. Wait for the blade to stop to get our scrap. Okay, then we take care of our scrap, put it in the scrap box. If this board comes away from the fence, your measurement's changed. It's no longer going to be 11 1/4 what I want, okay? So I had to keep it tight to the fence. That was step number 2. Step number 3. Coming over here, keeping the straight edge against the fence. we're going to square an end. Okay, so I should have an extra inch, so I'm going to take off about a 1/2 inch. Here we go. Finger 6 inches. All right, so that happens sometimes. The scrap piece gets behind the blade when I pull it out. That's another reason why we don't want to come out any farther past, because it allows it to get behind there more. But as I push it back, sometimes it'll kick it out. We're fine. It happens. All right, I flip it over. Step number 4. Left my tape measure over here. And this thing's got to be, according to the plan, 20 inches. I make my mark at 20. Pencil's not very sharp, but that'll work. Try to leave the mark. Step number 4. Take it back slow, and the air from the blade a lot of times will push your scrap out rather than it coming behind it. All right, 4-step process, square and to size. Next thing I need to do is router the edges all the way around both sides. Take it over here to our router. I've got a 1/4 inch bit in there. So we're going to router. Got to have it plugged in. Won't get very far without electricity. Okay, here we go. Remember, it rides on the bushing. Should start on the end grain first. So a lot of times you'll get tear out right here. So that's why we start on the end grain first. Keep it moving so it doesn't burn. See the tear out? Now we'll get rid of that with the last pass. So going across the grain, it tears out more. With the grain, it doesn't tend to tear out. Other side, end grain first. Okay, now the next step on this plan of procedure is to put in our hanger bolts, centered. So these bolts right here, let me show you. Take the hardware off here. So this bolt goes into our top. Notice there's a washer there so these parts don't rub on each other. If they did, we would rub the finish off of our leg. So we put a washer in there so that can't happen. And then our twist knob here. Okay, so we got to put those hanger bolts in. So I'll have hanger bolts for you. Okay, we'll need a couple of nuts and a washer, and I'll show you why here in a minute. This is a dowel jig. It helps us drill centered. It'll center our drill for us. We want to center it this way with our tape, so 1/2 of 11 1/4, right, would be what? What's 1/2 of 11? Be 5 1/2 plus 1/2 of 1/4 would be another 1/8, so it'd be 5 5/8 right there. And we'll measure the other way, make sure we're right. About 5 5/8. All right, same thing on the other side. Right about there. That'll work. Okay, so I don't have table vices on the table. Someday I may, they're stored. They're not the best. Someday I may put them on the table. It would be nice right now to have them. But I've got a system set up here of our clamps. Oops, that's not going to let me move. So I'm tightening down a clamp, a glue clamp onto the table just to hold it. Same thing over here. All right, and I've got these clamps just so it doesn't move on me or fall off the table, because it's a little top heavy right now. All right, so I'm gonna line up to my mark. I want this hole, and there's a mark underneath there, a white mark. I'm lining up with my pencil mark. You see it? I lock it down. So I measured to center it this way. This jig is centering it that way. I've got my bit in my gun, and I need to go 1.25 inches deep. So from right here, I need to go 1.25 inches, and I've already measured, so I know I got about 1/8 inch left. Okay, so we'll drill it. About right there, clean it out. Other side. Now, let me show you what we do here. I need to put that in there. How would you do it? We can't do it with our fingers, it's too tight.